Welcome to Nightward Echo. Tonight, in 10 disturbing true jungle horror stories from Northern California, the Vanishing campers, we travel across forests where the light never truly chases away the dark. From overgrown campsites to hidden trails twisting through ancient redwoods, these are the encounters that blur the line between the living and whatever lingers just beyond it. Every story you're about to hear comes from people who experienced something they can't explain. Campers who vanished without a trace, hikers who heard their names whispered in the fog, and locals who swear some forests remember more than they should. My goal this month is to reach 200 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers listen and disappear without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the darkness. Subscribe now before we begin. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's a place in Northern California that unsettles you, a trail, a campsite, a cabin, type its name below. Because when night falls in these woods, the past doesn't always stay buried. Kill the lights, silence the world, take a slow breath, and let us begin. When three hikers followed strange orange lights deep into the forest, they thought it was another campsite. What they found instead was a clearing that shouldn't exist, and voices calling their names from the dark. I still don't know what we saw that night, or how to explain it in a way that doesn't sound like I've lost my mind. I've told this story a few times to people I trust, but every time I do, it feels less like a memory and more like a warning, like something that didn't just happen to us, but waited for us. It was October of 2022. My friends Jake and Laura had convinced me to join them for a weekend hike along the Redwood Trail up in Northern California. I'm not much of a nature guy, but they'd been doing these weekend hikes for months, and I figured a couple of days away from screens would do me some good. The Redwood Trail is huge, miles of thick forest, dirt paths and campsites that are only reachable by foot. The ranger at the entry station mentioned that a section near the East Ridge had been temporarily closed after a small landslide, but we weren't planning to go that far. We just wanted a quiet campsite and a night under the stars. By late afternoon, we'd set up camp near a clearing. It was peaceful, pine needles underfoot, the faint smell of moss and wood smoke from someone else's camp a mile away. Laura had brought a small speaker. Jake was cooking freeze-dried chili, and for the first time in months, I actually felt relaxed. That changed around 9 p.m. We were sitting by the fire when Laura noticed it first. A faint orange light flickering through the trees, maybe a few hundred yards off the trail. At first, I thought it was just another group of campers. The forest had that weird kind of stillness where sound doesn't carry right, so it was hard to tell how far it was. Jake shaded his eyes and said, "Looks like someone's got a lantern out there." But something about the light bothered me. It wasn't steady like a campfire or the warm yellow of a flashlight. It pulsed slow and uneven, almost like a heartbeat. And it wasn't stationary. It drifted between the trees, vanishing and reappearing always in the same general area, but never quite still. Laura wanted to check it out. She said maybe someone was lost or setting up camp. I wanted to ignore it, but Jake had that adventurous look on his face, so of course I got outvoted. We grabbed our flashlights and followed the trail east, deeper into the woods. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. The sound of wind in the branches faded. Even the bugs seemed to stop buzzing. After about 10 minutes, we reached a point where the trees opened slightly, and the forest floor turned uneven. I could see the light again, brighter now, orange-white, like a torch burning without smoke. But what struck me most was the smell. It wasn't wood smoke or anything natural. It was metallic sharp, like hot wires or burned metal. Jake whispered, "You smell that?" And I nodded. We called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" But there was no answer. Just the sound of leaves crunching under our feet and that low hum that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. We reached a clearing that I swear wasn't on the trail map. Perfectly circular, maybe 30 feet across. The ground was covered in ash, not dirt ash, as if there'd been a fire that somehow didn't spread beyond the circle. And in the center of it were three lights. Floating a few feet off the ground, they weren't lanterns. They weren't reflections. They just hovered there, pulsing slowly, like embers suspended in air. Laura whispered, "What is that?" Jake took a step forward and the lights dimmed. Then, and I'll never forget this, when one of them flickered and I heard it, my name, faint, stretched, like someone whispering from underwater. Eli. I froze. I thought maybe it was Laura playing a trick, but she was standing behind me, her flashlight trembling. Jake looked at me, confused. Did you just... Before he could finish, the lights flared again, brighter, almost white, and the ash on the ground moved, swirling in tiny spirals around our feet. It looked like something beneath the soil was shifting. Laura grabbed my arm and said, "We need to go." But Jake, always the idiot, crouched down and touched the ash. "It's warm," he said, like it just burned. And then, from the tree line opposite us, we heard the sound of someone walking. Not running, just slow, deliberate steps. A voice came from the dark, and Jake? It was Laura's voice. Perfectly matched. Same pitch, same tone, but Laura was still right next to me. Jake stood up fast. His face went pale. "Laura?" he whispered. The other Laura said again, "Jake, come here." I shined my flashlight toward the voice, but it barely cut through the dark. All I saw was movement, the outline of a person standing just at the edge of the light. That's when the floating lights started to drift toward us. We bolted. Branches whipped against my face as we ran back through the forest. I didn't look back. All I could hear was the crunch of leaves, my own heartbeat, and those damn footsteps behind us matching our pace. At one point, I swear I heard that voice again. Not Laura's anymore, but my own. It called out from somewhere behind me, "Eli, stop!" That broke something in me. I didn't stop running until I saw the faint glow of our campfire through the trees. When we burst back into the clearing, everything looked normal. The tent, the fire, our packs. But something was off. The woods behind us were dead silent. No wind, no crickets, nothing. Jake was pacing, muttering that maybe it was some prank or weird gas pocket. Laura was crying, saying we should pack up and leave right then. I agreed. It took us less than 5 minutes to throw our stuff together. But just as I was zipping up my bag, I noticed something in the ashes of our campfire. 3 small orange embers, pulsing slowly. We hiked all the way back to the parking lot that night, using our phone flashlights after the batteries in our real ones died. The ranger station was closed. We ended up sleeping in the car. The next morning, the forest looked calm, almost too normal. We didn't talk much on the drive back. A week later, Jake sent us a photo he'd taken near the clearing before we ran. He said he didn't remember snapping it, but it had saved automatically to his phone. It showed the 3 lights, faint and blurry, and something standing between them. A figure. No face, no features. Just the outline of a person turned toward the camera, with 3 orange orbs hovering where their head should have been. We haven't spoken about it since, but sometimes, when I'm driving at night, I see that same glow reflected in my rearview mirror. Faint orange, pulsing slowly, following me down the road. And every time it does, I swear I hear my name. I've gone hiking my entire life. My dad got me into it when I was a kid, and since then, being out in the woods has always been my escape. I've done long trails across Colorado, Oregon, and Montana, but nothing ever came close to what happened last fall in northern Washington. I've been trying to rationalize it for almost a year now, but every time I think about that cabin, I get the same cold, crawling feeling down my spine. It started as a simple weekend trip. My buddy Eric and I had planned a 2-day backpacking loop through a stretch of forest near Mount Baker. We weren't on an official trail for most of it, just a series of old logging roads and unmarked paths we'd found on topographic maps. The goal was to camp deep enough in the woods that we wouldn't see another person for days. The first night went fine. We camped near a stream, made a fire, cooked some canned chili, and talked until midnight. The forest was quiet except for the water and a few owls. But when I woke up around 3 a.m., I thought I heard something, a faint rhythmic tapping sound. At first, I thought it was branches swaying or maybe a woodpecker, but it was too steady for that. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up and looked around the tent, but Eric was dead asleep. I unzipped the flap, peeked out, and saw nothing but trees. The tapping stopped. I told myself it was probably just water dripping from a branch onto something hollow. Still, I had trouble falling back asleep after that. The next morning, the forest looked different. That's the only way I can describe it. The trees seemed closer together. The light didn't come through as clearly as it had the day before. Even the air felt heavy, like we'd walked into a different patch of woods entirely. Eric felt it too. He kept saying it was eerily still. We started hiking around 9 a.m., following our planned route northwest. But by noon, we both realized something was wrong. The terrain didn't match the map anymore. Where there should have been a small ridge, there was just a flat stretch of pine and moss. The stream we'd camped near had completely vanished. Eric joked that maybe our GPS was drunk, but I could see he was uneasy. Around 1:30 p.m., that's when we saw it, the cabin. It was just sitting there, in a small clearing that neither of us remembered passing before. A small wooden structure, maybe 15 feet by 20, with a steep roof and a single crooked chimney. The wood looked freshly cut, bright and clean, not weathered at all. That was strange enough considering we were miles from any road. But what really threw me off was the candle. Through one of the windows, we could see a small orange glow. Someone's home, Eric said, but I didn't think so. The clearing looked untouched. No footprints, no path leading to or from it. Just ferns, pine needles, and silence. We stood there for a minute, debating whether to check it out. Against my better judgment, curiosity got the better of us. We approached slowly. As we got closer, I noticed the door was slightly open. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. Just the creak of wood in the wind. The inside was wrong. Everything was old. Not just a little old, like 1800s old. A cast iron stove, a wooden rocking chair, a table with a cracked ceramic bowl on it. The floorboards were uneven and covered in dust, but the air smelled faintly of pine and wax. The candle on the table was still burning. A small white taper, melted halfway down. Eric walked in and said, "Man, this place looks like a museum exhibit." He touched the table, leaving finger marks in the dust. I remember feeling like we were intruding, like whoever built this place wasn't meant to be disturbed. In the corner there was a bed, an iron frame with a straw mattress. On it lay a folded blanket, and on top of the blanket was a pocket watch, the kind with ornate engravings and a little chain. Eric picked it up. It was ice cold, even though the cabin wasn't. The second hand was ticking. That's when we both heard it. The same tapping sound I'd heard the night before. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the far wall. Behind the small wood stove, Eric froze, eyes darting toward me. "It's probably a branch hitting the wall," he whispered. Except there were no trees close enough to touch the cabin. He crouched and peered behind the stove, then jerked back like he'd seen a snake. "Dude, there's something carved back here," he said. We moved the stove a few inches to the side. It wasn't connected to a chimney, oddly. And there it was. A carving etched into the wood. "Do not stay after dark." That was enough for me. I told Eric we should leave. He laughed nervously, said maybe it was some survivalist's weird joke. But as we stepped outside, something about the clearing had changed. It looked smaller. The trees were closer. The air felt colder. The sky, which had been gray and overcast, was now dimming fast, like it was closer to sunset than mid-afternoon. We hiked hard in the direction we thought was east, trying to find the logging road. After about an hour, Eric stopped. He pointed behind me and said, "Tell me you're seeing that." Through the trees, maybe 50 yards away, we could see the cabin again. Same clearing, same crooked chimney, same faint orange glow in the window. We hadn't looped back. I'm sure of it. I'd been tracking our path on GPS. But when I checked the device again, the screen showed nothing but static. No signal, no map, just a flickering green grid. That's when I started to panic. I told Eric we needed to go in a straight line until we hit water or a road. We picked a direction and started walking fast. The forest seemed to close in around us. I could swear the sound of our own footsteps got muffled, like the woods were swallowing the noise. After maybe another 30 minutes, the light started fading fast. The forest turned from gray to black in minutes, and that's when we saw it again. Not the cabin this time, but a flicker of candlelight moving between the trees. It wasn't stationary. It was walking. We both froze. The flame bobbed slightly, weaving between trunks about 20 feet ahead. Then it stopped. "Hello?" Eric shouted. "We're lost. Can you help us?" No response. The flame just hovered there for a second, then began to move, slowly, deliberately, and in the opposite direction. We didn't follow it. Instead, we turned and ran. I don't remember much after that, except crashing through branches and hearing what sounded like whispering. Faint, close, like someone murmuring just behind us. I tripped at one point, and when I looked up, I could see Eric ahead of me, flashlight swinging wildly. Eventually, we burst out onto a dirt road. I don't know how long we ran, but when we finally stopped, gasping for breath, the forest behind us was pitch black. We set up camp right there on the road that night, too scared to move further. Neither of us spoke. We just stared at the dark tree line, waiting for something to emerge. Nothing did. In the morning, the GPS started working again. We were 5 miles off course, deep in a part of the forest that, according to the topographic map, hadn't been logged or built on in over 100 years. There were no clearings marked anywhere near that location. We reported the cabin to a park ranger later that day. He just stared at us for a while, then said quietly, "You're not the first ones to mention something like that." He didn't elaborate. When I pressed him, he just said, "If you ever see that place again, don't go near it. It's not supposed to be there." I don't know what that meant. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it again, that faint, steady tapping, tap, 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 and every time I do, I swear I smell candle wax. I've worked as a forest ranger along California's Big Sur coastline for over 7 years now. Most of the time, the job's peaceful. Quiet trails, ocean mist rolling through redwoods, the occasional hiker who thinks off-trail means straight into the wild. But sometimes, when the fog creeps in and the forest goes dead silent, you get that eerie reminder that this place is ancient. It feels alive in ways you can't explain. This story happened last fall, and I swear to God I haven't been the same since. It started after a late-night patrol. We had a series of small brush fires popping up near Highway 1, so my supervisor, Mark, asked me to stay overnight at one of the remote cabins up by Pfeiffer Ridge. I'd done it a dozen times before. The cabin's old, built in the 60s for fire lookouts, but it's solid. Wooden stove, radio, cot, the usual. Around midnight, I finished my sweep and radioed back to the station. "Unit 2 to base, all clear. No signs of flare-ups," Mark replied. "Copy that, Unit 2. Get some rest. You've earned it." I hung the receiver, stretched, and got ready to crash. But just as I reached for the lantern, the radio crackled again. "Unit 2, this is base. Come in." I frowned. "Yeah, Mark?" I thought we were done for the night. Static. Then after a pause, a voice that wasn't Mark said, "Unit 2, you're not clear." I froze. The voice sounded like mine. My exact tone, even the same slight rasp I get after long shifts. I waited, staring at the radio. "Mark, you playing a joke on me?" No response. I tried to laugh it off, told myself maybe it was feedback or a relay error. Radios around here sometimes pick up strange frequencies from nearby stations. Still, I unplugged it just to be sure and went to bed. The next night, it happened again. Same time, around midnight. Same voice, "Unit 2, come in." "Do you copy?" It was me again. No mistake this time. Even said it with that same rhythm I used in my own call-ins. I didn't answer at first, just listened. Then came the whisper, soft, almost under the static. "There's someone in the trees." I bolted upright, grabbed my flashlight, and scanned the window. The fog was thick outside, but I thought I saw a movement, just a shape. Darker than the rest, shifting between the trunks. "Mark, if that's you messing with me, I swear I'll..." But the radio cut in again. This time, both voices overlapped, mine and something deeper beneath it. Almost like two versions of me speaking at once. "Unit 2, you're not alone," I called it in the next morning. Told Mark about the interference, the voice, everything. He looked concerned but tried to stay professional. "You've been pulling long hours, Mike," he said. "Sometimes fatigue messes with your head out here." The fog carries sound weird, could have been your echo bouncing through the canyons. I didn't argue. But I knew echoes don't mimic your words word for word. That afternoon, I checked the frequency logs for the radio network. Every transmission gets time-stamped. Around 12:03 a.m., there was an inbound signal on my line, but it didn't come from base, it came from another unit. Unit 2 mine, I asked the tech team if it could have been a glitch. They said no, it was a separate signal entirely. 2 nights later, I got assigned to patrol near Malera Canyon, deeper into the woods. It's remote, quiet, and you can barely get a signal out there. I took my gear, parked the ATV, and walked the ridge line with my flashlight cutting through the mist. Everything was fine until around 11:45 p.m. when my radio beeped. "Unit 2, do you copy?" I froze. "Mark?" I asked, even though I knew that tone. That voice, silence. Then clearer this time. "Stop walking." I stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. "Look to your left." I turned the flashlight slowly. About 20 feet away, behind a tree, there was someone standing there. The beam caught just enough. Tan ranger uniform, same badge, same shoulder patch, but the face, I couldn't make it out. It was like the light slid off it, leaving only a blur where the features should have been. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound brave. The figure tilted its head. Then the radio crackled again, same voice, my voice. "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled backward, flashlight trembling. The figure stepped closer and the static on the radio grew louder, almost screaming now. Then, silence. The figure was gone. I ran back to the ATV, radio still in my hand, shouting for base. No answer. I drove straight to the main station. Mark and another ranger, Lisa, were already there. They said I looked pale as a ghost. When I told them what I saw, Lisa's face drained of color. She said, "Mike, this isn't the first time. Apparently a ranger named Ben, Unit 2 before me, went missing 5 years ago in that same area. They found his ATV, his radio, his jacket, but not him. He'd reported seeing himself through the fog the night before he vanished. They wrote it off as stress. I didn't go back on night patrols for weeks. When I finally did, I switched call signs to Unit 4, thinking maybe it had put my mind at ease. But last week, during a late shift, I decided to test something. I tuned my radio to the old frequency Ben used, the one for Unit 2. Nothing at first. Just the hum of static. Then faintly under it all, "Unit 2, come in." It wasn't my voice this time. It wasn't even human. Just this slow, distorted whisper that seemed to echo from far away, like it was moving through the trees. Then came a click and a new voice. Calm. Familiar. "Mike, it's you." I dropped the radio, because that voice, my voice, came from right behind me. When I turned, there was nothing there but the trees and that endless fog rolling in from the ocean. I don't stay after dark anymore. I transfer next month. I've already told Mark I'm done with Big Sur, but last night my home scanner picked up something. My new call sign, Unit 4, to a faint voice repeating through static again and again. "Unit 4, this is Unit 2, you're not clear." And the worst part? It didn't sound like me this time. It sounded like someone else. Someone still out there in the woods calling for help. It's been almost 3 years since that camping trip in northern Arizona, and I still can't explain what we saw that night. I've told the story a few times to friends, and every time they think I'm exaggerating. But the thing is, I wish I was. I wish it was just some messed up story we told to scare each other around a campfire. But I know what I saw. We all do. It was early October, that sweet spot between summer heat and winter chill. My buddy Trevor had planned a weekend camping trip to a place called Echo Ravine, a narrow, forested canyon about 2 hours outside Flagstaff. He said it wasn't on any official map, but that he'd gone there once before with his cousin. Perfect for stargazing, he'd said. No people, no noise, no cell signal, just peace. There were 4 of us, me, Trevor, his girlfriend Alyssa, and our friend Nate. We were all in our mid-20s, working different jobs but trying to hold on to that little piece of freedom we used to have in college. None of us were hardcore campers, but we liked hiking and a bit of adventure. When we arrived that Friday afternoon, the air had that crisp mountain bite. The ravine was deep and narrow, surrounded by tall pines that blotted out most of the sky. We set up camp near the edge of a small drop-off overlooking a dry creek bed. Across from us, maybe half a mile away on the other side of the ravine, was another stretch of flat ground, dark and untouched. We spent the day hiking and taking pictures. Nothing strange, just normal camping stuff. But around sunset, something caught our attention. A light flickered in the distance across the ravine near the other side. It was faint at first, like someone had lit a campfire. We could see a little glow dancing between the trees. "Guess we're not alone out here," Trevor said. Nate laughed. "Kinda comforting, actually, knowing someone else is nearby." We all agreed. It didn't seem odd at the time. We even waved across the gap once or twice, just being friendly, though the light was too far to see anyone clearly. By nightfall, we could still see the orange flicker, steady and rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The sound of crackling seemed to carry faintly through the canyon, though that didn't make sense. Considering how far it was, we joked about going over to say hi, but the ravine was steep, and we didn't have the energy for night hiking. Instead, we roasted marshmallows, told dumb stories, and occasionally looked across to see that same steady glow. Then, sometime after midnight, The fire across the ravine suddenly went out. No flicker. No smoke. Nothing. Just blackness. Trevor noticed it first. "Guess they turned in for the night," he said. But something about how abruptly it vanished fell off. No dimming, no fading, just gone like a light switch. We all got quiet after that. Eventually, we went to our tents and fell asleep. The next morning, Trevor suggested we hike down and check out the other site, see who our neighbors were. The path down was rocky and uneven with a lot of loose stones, but we managed to cross the dry creek bed and climb up the opposite slope. It took us about 30 minutes to reach the spot where we'd seen the fire. When we got there was nothing. No tents. No ashes, no wood. No sign anyone had camped there. Just a patch of blackened ground like something had burned directly into the dirt, leaving it charred and brittle. Alyssa crouched down and touched it. The soil was still warm. "That's weird," she murmured. "It feels like it burned recently." We all stood there uneasy. Trevor looked around for footprints or gear, but there was nothing. Just trees and silence. Then Nate said something that made my stomach twist. Guys?" He pointed at the ground near the burned spot. "Look at these footprints. 4 sets, our same shoes, same tread pattern, leading into the clearing, and circling it, then heading back the way we'd come." We all froze. Alyssa started laughing nervously. "Wait, that doesn't make sense. We just got here." But the prints were clear, pressed deep into the soft earth like we'd walked there hours ago. Even stranger, there were no other prints. No sign anyone else had been there before us. Trevor's voice got tight. Maybe some weird erosion thing? Like the dirt settled funny overnight? But none of us bought that. The more we looked, the worse it got. There were faint marks in the dirt where something circular had been, about the size of a campfire ring. But no stones, no wood. Just that scorched imprint. Then we noticed something else. The smell. It wasn't smoke exactly. More like something burned that shouldn't have been. Sweet chemical, almost metallic. It made the back of my throat itch. Alyssa backed away. "Let's go. I don't like this." No one argued. We hiked back in silence. The air felt heavier somehow, and the woods seemed quieter than before, like even the birds had stopped. When we got back to our site, I swear I could still see that black patch in my mind. That night, none of us could relax. We didn't light a fire. We just sat under the stars, each pretending we weren't freaked out. Around midnight, I noticed Trevor staring out across the ravine. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer at first. Then he pointed. There across the ravine, a fire was burning again, same spot, same glow. Only this time, there were shadows moving around it. I could see them. 3 or 4 figures shifting back and forth, just silhouettes against the orange light. They weren't standing normally either. Their movements were jerky, stiff like marionettes being tugged by invisible strings. "Do you see that?" Trevor whispered. Alyssa started crying quietly. Nate stood up like he was about to yell something, but Trevor grabbed his arm. We just watched. The figures circled the fire slowly, again and again, their limbs bending wrong. The light flickered across the trees, casting long, twisted shadows that didn't match their movements, and then, as before, snap, the fire went out. Darkness swallowed the ravine. No one slept after that. By dawn, we packed up and left. None of us said much. When we reached the main road, our phones came back online, and Trevor tried to find Echo Ravine on GPS, only to realize there was no record of it. Not a single result. We never went back. A few weeks later, out of curiosity, I looked up missing person reports in that area. There were a few, mostly old, hikers and campers who'd vanished without a trace near the Coconino National Forest. One case stood out, a group of 3 friends who disappeared in 1997. Their campsite was found completely burned. No remains, no explanation. Sometimes when I think about that night, I wonder if the figures we saw across the ravine were them. Or worse, if we were looking at ourselves. Because every once in a while, when I close my eyes, I still see that fire, and I swear the figures are getting closer. I've never told anyone this story in full, mostly because I know how it sounds. But it's been eating at me ever since that night. I wasn't supposed to be in those woods to begin with. I just needed to clear my head after a messy breakup and a few too many nights drowning myself in cheap whiskey. Hiking had always helped me reset, so I drove up to Red Hollow National Park in northern Oregon, a place I'd been to once before. Years ago with my dad. It was early October. The air already carrying that cold, wet bite that seeps through your jacket. The forecast said light morning fog, but by the time I parked my car at the Raven Ridge trailhead, I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. Still, I figured I'd be fine. I wasn't planning to go deep, just a few miles out, then circle back before dark. That was my first mistake. At first, it was peaceful. The world felt muffled, like sound itself was trapped in the fog. I could hear water dripping from the trees and the crunch of wet leaves under my boots. My phone lost signal within 20 minutes, but I didn't think much of it. I'd downloaded an offline trail map and the path was clearly marked. About an hour in, I started to notice how quiet everything had become. No birds, no wind, just that thick, damp silence. Then somewhere off to my right, I heard it. A single, drawn-out whistle. It wasn't like someone calling for help. It was low and steady, like someone whistling to a tune they knew well. I froze. It came again, this time closer. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone there?" No response, just the fog pressing closer around me. I told myself it was another hiker, maybe someone trying to find their way. But when I looked at my map, I realized I'd somehow wandered off the main trail. The dirt beneath me looked less packed down and the trees were thicker here. I must have missed a turn in the fog, so I started back the way I thought I came. That's when I saw him. At first, he was just a shape, a dark silhouette in the gray wall ahead. As I got closer, I could make out the details. A tall man wearing what looked like an old park ranger uniform. Brown jacket, had a small metal badge that caught the faint light. Relief flooded through me. I called out, "Hey!" I think I got turned around. "Can you help me find the main trail?" The man didn't say anything at first. He just stood there like he was studying me through the fog. Then he lifted his arm and pointed deeper into the woods. "Trail's this way," he said, voice calm and steady. There was something strange about how he said it, like his words didn't quite echo right, but I followed anyway, grateful to see another person. As we walked, he asked me a few questions, simple stuff. "Where you from? Came up alone? How long you planning to stay?" His tone was friendly enough, but his voice had this flatness to it. Like there was no real emotion behind it, just the rhythm of someone going through the motions of a conversation. I tried to make out his face, but the fog made it hard to see clearly. The most I could tell was that his skin looked pale, almost grayish, and his eyes seemed off, like they didn't focus properly. After maybe 20 minutes, I noticed we weren't going uphill or downhill anymore. We were just walking. The ground beneath us was soft and damp, and the trees around us were growing denser. I finally asked, "Are you sure this is the right way?" He didn't answer. He just kept walking ahead of me, slower this time. Then he stopped. Without turning around, he said, "You shouldn't have come here today." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. He turned to face me, and for a split second I could see his face clearly. It wasn't right. His features looked smudged, like his skin didn't fit properly, or like I was seeing him through a warped mirror. His mouth didn't move when he spoke next. "Go back. Follow the river. Don't stop until you see the road." And before I could say anything else, he stepped backward into the fog and was just gone. I stood there, shaking, not sure if I was about to pass out or throw up. The silence was heavier than before, and I realized I couldn't even hear my own breathing. Then faintly, I caught the sound of running water. I ran toward it. After a few minutes, I stumbled onto a narrow creek cutting through the woods. I followed it downstream like the man, or whatever he was, had told me. The fog began to thin out after a while, and I finally spotted a wooden sign half buried in moss. Raven Ridge Trail, 2 miles. By the time I made it back to my car, the fog had almost cleared. It was late afternoon, and there were 2 Park Service trucks parked near the lot. A woman in uniform was checking equipment, so I ran over to her. Still out of breath, I told her everything. How I'd gotten lost, the man in the brown uniform, how he'd guided me back. When I mentioned his outfit, she frowned. "Brown?" she said. "You sure it wasn't green? We haven't used brown uniforms since, God, the early 2000s. I asked if maybe an older ranger was still around, someone who wore the old gear. She looked uneasy. No, the last ranger to patrol Raven Ridge wore brown. His name was Samuel Cobb. He went missing in 2003. Search teams never found him. She said it quietly, like she didn't want to believe her own words. I just stood there, staring out at the fog starting to creep back over the tree line. Before I left, she added something that's been stuck in my head ever since. "You're not the first hiker to mention seeing a ranger out there. Usually in fog like this, it's been months since that day, but I still dream about him. I'll wake up gasping, remembering his pale face and that voice that didn't match his lips. Sometimes, when the weather's cold and the mist rolls in outside my window, I swear I can hear that low whistle again, just barely, like it's coming from somewhere deep in the fog. And every time, I remember what he said. 'You shouldn't have come here today.' I think about what would have happened if I hadn't listened. If I hadn't followed the river. If I'd followed him deeper into the woods instead. Maybe that's why the fog still comes back. Maybe he's still out there guiding the lost. Or maybe he's just trying to find his way out." I don't even know where to start with this, but I feel like I need to get it out there. This happened to me and my friend Mark last fall, and I still can't explain it. If you're the type who likes camping or hiking, maybe just don't do what we did. It all started in the Shasta Trinity National Forest in Northern California. Mark and I had been planning a weekend hike for months. We wanted to do something a little more off the beaten path, away from the popular trails. The morning was perfect. Crisp, fog hanging low in the valleys, sunlight barely breaking through the redwoods. We parked at a small, almost hidden trailhead and started our hike with our usual gear. Backpacks, water, some snacks, and our phones for GPS. At first, the hike was normal. The trail twisted around tall trees and past moss-covered rocks. We were joking, talking about work, life, and how peaceful it was out there. But after a little over an hour, I noticed something odd. My GPS kept flickering, then resetting itself. I shrugged it off. Maybe the forest coverage was too thick. But then I noticed Mark's GPS was doing the exact same thing. "What the hell?" he muttered, looking down at his screen. "It's like we're not moving." I laughed nervously. Yeah, maybe the satellite's messing up. But then we got to a fallen tree across the trail, huge and mossy, like it had been there for decades. Nothing strange about that, except we had passed it before. At least I could swear we had. Mark stopped and looked at me, frowning. "Didn't we already pass this tree? Like 10 minutes ago?" I paused. And that's when it hit me. I couldn't remember. Not clearly. The trail felt familiar, almost exactly the same as before. We both shrugged it off, blaming exhaustion and the similarity of the trees. We kept walking, and then it happened again. Another hour later, after trying to follow the GPS, we ended up back at the same fallen tree. And this time, we noticed something else, fresh footprints in the damp soil beside it. They weren't ours, not even close. Mark froze. "Someone's been following us?" I shook my head. "I don't know. Maybe it's hunters or another hiker. But why would they be walking around in circles?" We decided to keep moving, trying to find another landmark. But every direction we went, every path we tried, we ended up back at that same tree. And the footprints, they were always there, new, as if whoever or whatever was walking beside us had just moved a few steps away and disappeared. By the third loop, the sun was starting to dip behind the trees and the forest felt different, denser, heavier. The fog was thickening, curling around the trunks and dampening our sound. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch had us stopping in our tracks. It was like the forest was alive and watching. At one point, we tried marking the trees with small pieces of tape so we'd know we were moving forward. By the time we returned to the fallen tree, every mark we'd made was gone. Not moved, gone, clean bark, no signs we'd been there. That's when panic started to creep in. We tried to call someone. Cell service was spotty, but maybe enough to reach someone. Nothing. No signal. Not a single bar. It was like we were cut off from the world entirely. As the sky darkened, I swear I heard voices. Not loud, not clear, but whispers. They came from all around us, sometimes seeming behind us, sometimes in front. I told Mark and he shook his head at first, saying it was just the wind. But then he froze, pointing to the ground. Fresh footprints again. But this time, they weren't human. Small, but too wide, uneven, almost like claws. And they weren't walking in a straight line. They circled us, weaving in and out of the fog. We ran, literally ran, screaming for any trail that might lead us out. Every path we tried, back to the fallen tree. Every turn, the same footprints. We tried climbing a small hill, hoping for a better view. But the fog was so thick we couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. It felt endless. The forest was endless, and then we saw it. A figure standing behind the fallen tree. Tall, skinny, hunched over slightly, completely black against the fog. I can't describe a face because I never saw one. Just two glowing white points. Eyes. They didn't blink. They just stared. Mark and I froze. I don't even know how we moved after that. I grabbed his arm, and we ran blindly, not caring which direction. But every direction was the tree. Every direction was the same figure, just a little closer. And the whispers. They were louder now, circling us, mocking us. I don't remember how long we ran. Hours, maybe. When we finally stumbled onto a real trail, one with signs and a proper path, the figure was gone. No footprints, no whispering, nothing. We didn't stop running until we reached the parking lot. Shaking, silent, eyes darting around. People were there, other hikers, and everything looked normal. Too normal. We never went back to that trail. I deleted the GPS footage and swore never to talk about it. But the thing is, I can't shake the feeling that if I ever go back to the Shasta Trinity Forest, I'll find that tree again. And maybe, just maybe, the footprints will still be there, waiting for me. Because I've realized something. The forest isn't just a forest. It's a loop, a trap, and that thing, it waits for you to get lost. I still check maps, GPS, anything. But sometimes, late at night, I see a tree in the fog, and I remember the whispers. I never thought I'd end up telling this story online, but after what happened, I can't shake it. I need someone to know, because keeping it in my head has been driving me insane. This happened last summer back in Northern California, in one of the stretches of the forest that nobody bothers to explore. My friends, Casey and Jordan, and I were on a week-long camping trip. Nothing fancy, just tents, a cooler full of food, and a couple of old maps we'd printed from the internet. On the third day, we decided to leave the main trail and explore a ridge that wasn't marked on any of the tourist maps. We were looking for a little adventure and, honestly, a break from the crowds. The forest was dense and quiet, almost unnaturally so. No birds singing, no rustling animals, just the wind in the trees and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. By mid-afternoon, we stumbled upon something that made us stop dead. A small wooden cabin tucked into a clearing. At first glance, it looked like someone's summer cabin, but it was too neat, too sterile. There was no smoke from a chimney, no trail of footprints in the dirt. We approached cautiously. The sign above the door read, "Ranger Station, closed." The paint was peeling, faded by years of sun and rain, but it was legible. The door was unlocked. Inside, it was pristine. Shelves were stocked with canned food, boxes of trail maps, and a dusty but working radio set. A first aid kit hung on the wall, supplies all accounted for. There were bunks, small personal lockers, even an old journal lying on the desk. The kind of place you'd expect a ranger to leave behind on a weekend trip. Not a place abandoned for decades. We laughed nervously, Casey whispering, "Well, at least it's warm if it rains." Jordan was the first to open the journal. The handwriting was small, cramped, and strangely formal, like someone was keeping meticulous records. Entries detailed patrols, wildlife sightings, lost hikers found, and every other routine duty you'd expect from a forest ranger. The last entry was dated 1986. We froze when we realized something. There were footprints in the dust. Fresh footprints, not ours, smaller than any adult males, leading from the back room and stopping right at the front door. "What the hell?" I whispered. Casey shrugged nervously. "Maybe someone else is camping out here. Like a hiker or something?" Jordan frowned. "But look at this. The footprints don't even look like they came from shoes. Our soles. And they're tiny, like a kid's. I wanted to leave immediately, but we were already deep into the forest and the sun was beginning to set. We decided to spend the night using the station for shelter. The first few hours were uneventful, though I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every creak of the floor, every tapping of a branch against the wall made my stomach tighten. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of static over the radio. It wasn't random noise. It was voices, muffled, overlapping, whispering. I nudged Casey and Jordan and we huddled around the device. Then the whispering stopped. Silence. And the instant silence was louder than the static. We didn't sleep much after that. Every time we tried, I swear the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift, like something was leaning just out of sight. Casey swore she heard someone walking outside, pacing near the edge of the clearing, but whenever we peeked out the window, there was nothing. By morning, we were shaken but tried to convince ourselves it was paranoia. That's when we noticed the maps were wrong. Not the printed maps we brought, but the ones stored in the cabin. Trails that didn't exist, rivers that curved impossibly, forested areas that seemed endless. And on one of the maps, in red ink, there was a single circle drawn around a small clearing. No label, no explanation. Just the circle. Curiosity got the better of us. We packed some supplies and decided to follow the trail to that marked spot. The forest seemed to close in around us, shadows stretching unnaturally long. Birds finally sang, but only intermittently, as if startled by our presence. After nearly an hour of hiking, we reached the clearing. It was a small open patch of dirt surrounded by dense firs. Nothing remarkable, except the ground was covered in hundreds of tiny footprints, leading in every direction, stopping abruptly at the base of a massive tree. The bark was scarred, like claws had been dug into it, not recently, but enough to leave an impression. That's when we heard it. A low humming. Not from the forest, not from the wind, but from the ground. It was faint at first, then growing steadily louder. Casey grabbed my arm, panicked, and we all froze. The footprints began moving. Not just in the dirt, but shifting, like some invisible entity was dragging them across the forest floor. We ran. I can't even describe the panic, the terror in our lungs as we stumbled back through the forest. Behind us, I thought I heard whispers again, but this time words were distinguishable. "Don't leave. Stay. Stay." We reached the cabin and barricaded ourselves inside. Every shadow seemed alive, crawling along the walls. Jordan grabbed the radio, hoping to call for help, but all we got was static. And in the middle of the static, a single voice, clear and cold. "Welcome back." We didn't sleep again. We waited for dawn, but when it came, we found something we couldn't explain. The ranger station had changed. Supplies we remembered were missing. Maps we had studied were now blank. The footprints were gone. The journal lay open to a new entry, written in the same cramped handwriting as before. They found the station. Prepare. We left immediately, running through trails we didn't recognize back to where we thought civilization was. Hours later, we found a road, and eventually a ranger outpost where we asked about the cabin. The ranger frowned. "Cabin? What cabin?" "The ranger station you're talking about was abandoned in 1986. No one's been near it since. Hell, it's not even on any of our official maps anymore." We told ourselves it was a hallucination, a mix of forest exhaustion and overactive imaginations. But I can't. The footprints, the humming, the journal, that voice on the radio, and the thing that keeps me awake at night. The thought that maybe the cabin wasn't abandoned in the way we thought. Maybe it's waiting, patient, waiting for the next people to wander too far into the forest, to stumble upon the silent ranger station, where time doesn't exist and the forest keeps its secrets forever. We never went back. And honestly, I don't think we should, but every time I hear about missing hikers in Northern California, in that same stretch of dense forest, I can't help but wonder, are they at the cabin now? And more importantly, are we next? I don't know if anyone will believe this, but I need to write it down anyway. I've replayed that night in my head so many times, trying to make sense of what happened. And every time I do, the memory hits me like a punch I can't shake. I'll start from the beginning. It was late September, early fall in Northern California. My college friends and I decided to go camping along the Klamath River. There were 4 of us. Me, Daniel, my girlfriend Lena, and my friend Mark. We had all gone camping before. Nothing crazy, just tents, a small campfire, and a night or two away from the city. This time, though, we wanted something a little more remote. We found a stretch of river a few miles from the nearest town. No other campers, no roads leading directly to it. Just dense forest and the sound of water rushing over rocks. Perfect, we thought. We arrived around sunset. The river looked normal at first, quiet and serene, glinting pink under the fading sun. We set up our tents, started a fire, and made dinner. There was an odd smell in the air, like wet wood and something metallic, but we shrugged it off. Forests have weird smells, right? Night fell quickly. By the time the stars were out, the temperature had dropped. We were sitting around the fire telling stupid stories, drinking warm cider from a thermos. That's when we first heard it. At first, I thought it was Daniel messing with us. "Did you hear that?" Lena asked, her voice small. "Yeah, probably a raccoon or something," I said. But it wasn't a raccoon. It was a voice, faint, desperate, coming from somewhere across the river. "Help, please." We froze. Mark pointed his flashlight toward the sound. At first, all we saw was the black water glinting under the beam. Then, for a split second, something pale flashed in the current. It was waist-deep, and it looked like a person. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaking more than I realized. The figure didn't answer. It just stood there, still in the water. Then it called again. "Help me, please." We all shined our lights at the figure. Lena gasped. "It's a girl?" I don't know how long we stared. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe a minute. When we blinked, she was gone. No movement, no splash, nothing. Just the river flowing normally. We laughed nervously, telling ourselves it was a trick of the light, a reflection, or someone playing a prank. But the voice came again, quieter, almost begging. "Please." Daniel grabbed a stick and tried to poke at the water where she had been. Nothing. The water didn't ripple except for the normal current. "Maybe we should just call the police," Lena said. Her voice was trembling, and I wanted to agree, but we were miles from service. "Let's just stay in the tents," I suggested, trying to keep everyone calm. "It's probably just someone drunk wandering around." We tried to ignore it. We packed up some food, moved closer to the fire, and kept watch. But every time the river moved under the moonlight, it felt wrong, not natural. Sometimes the sound of the water would change, like it was whispering. Soft enough that if you weren't listening carefully, you'd think it was just the current. But I heard it. I swear I heard it. Hours passed. We were huddled in the tents, awake, pretending to be asleep. Around 2 a.m., Daniel nudged me awake. "Did you hear that?" He whispered. I did. It was her voice again, louder this time, closer. "Help me." Something made me throw open the tent flap. The river was calm, moonlight reflecting on the surface like silver glass. And there she was again, pale, waist-deep, hair plastered to her face. She wasn't moving except for her lips. I shouted, "Hey, are you okay?" She raised her hand weakly as if to reach us. Then she spoke. Not with words, but with a sound that twisted my stomach. A whisper, but it wasn't human. The water bubbled around her feet as if she wasn't standing on the riverbed, but floating just beneath the surface. And then, without warning, she was gone again. This time, no splash, no movement. Just silence and the cold creeping into our bones. We didn't sleep after that. We took turns keeping watch, our flashlights trained on the water, our hearts hammering so loud it drowned out the river. At one point, Lena swore she saw another figure standing in the trees behind us watching. But when we shone a light, nothing was there. By sunrise, we were exhausted and terrified. We packed up quickly, each of us avoiding eye contact, hoping daylight would make everything feel safe again. As we drove back to the nearest town, I tried to rationalize what happened. Maybe it was someone drowning who had somehow moved away with the current. Maybe I was hallucinating from exhaustion. But the others, they saw her too. They heard her. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then 2 days later, I got a text from Daniel. It was just a screenshot from the local news. A girl had gone missing near the Klamath River. Her description matched the figure we saw almost exactly. She had been last seen around the same time we were there. I haven't been back since. None of us have. I don't know if it was a ghost, a hallucination, or something else entirely. But every time I pass a river, every time I hear rushing water at night, I swear I hear her whispering, "Help me." And I can't stop thinking, what if next time she doesn't vanish? I'm not really sure how to even start this story, or if anyone's going to believe me, but I have to get it out there. This happened last October, deep in the forests of northern Mendocino County, California, and I've barely been able to sleep since. My friends and I still talk about it in hushed tones. Like saying it out loud too loud might make it real again. It all began with a weekend trip I went on with two of my closest friends, Mark and Eli. We'd been planning this camping trip for months, mostly just to get away from the city, drink a little, and hunt. None of us were particularly serious hunters, but Mendocino is known for its deer, and we figured it would be a good mix of outdoors and adventure. We got there on a Friday evening. The forest was exactly what you'd imagine, dense, quiet, with trees that looked old enough to have their own stories. We parked the truck near a small ridge, unloaded our gear, and set up a tent in a clearing we thought was perfect. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the moss-covered ground, and for a while it felt almost serene. The first night was normal. We drank a couple of beers, told some stupid stories, and fell asleep to the sound of the forest. But when I woke up around 2 a.m. for some water, I noticed something odd. Across the clearing, maybe 30 feet into the trees, there were two glowing points of light. I froze, thinking it had to be a deer or some other animal reflecting our lanterns. But as I watched, the lights didn't move like an animal would. They just stayed, watching. I shook it off and went back to sleep, assuming it was just my imagination. The next day, we hunted and explored, trying to forget about it. But as night fell, the feeling returned. This time, all three of us noticed it. While sitting around the fire, we caught glimpses of glowing eyes just at the edge of the tree line. They weren't moving, but every once in a while they would blink. Slow, deliberate blinks that didn't match any animal we'd ever seen. Mark laughed it off. "Probably just some deer or a coyote," he said. "We're tired, our eyes are playing tricks on us." Eli didn't speak much. He just kept staring into the darkness with this tense, almost rigid posture. That night I slept with one eye open, hearing every snap of a twig, every whisper of wind. The next day we decided to hike further up the ridge, deeper into the forest. The trees were thicker here, the air colder. Birds were silent. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath. We didn't see anything unusual at first, but the feeling of being watched never left. By the time evening rolled around, we'd made camp near a small, dry creek. We set up the tent and built a fire, trying to shake off the anxiety that had been creeping in. Around midnight, the eyes returned. They were closer now, maybe 20 feet from the tent. Mark joked again, but his voice sounded uncertain even to me. Eli whispered, "They're not animals." Nothing moves like that. We all went quiet then. The fire crackled, the shadows dancing across the clearing, and I started noticing more subtle things. Twigs snapped even when there was no wind. Leaves rustled in patterns, almost like something was pacing us. And the eyes? They were blinking in unison now, like they were communicating. Then it happened. The fire went out. Just like that, a gust of wind, a spark, and everything was darkness. I thought it was a coincidence until I heard Mark whisper, almost panicked, "Did you see that?" I looked up and froze. The eyes were gone. All of them. I felt a chill run through me and told myself we'd just blinked or our minds were messing with us. But before I could calm down, a sound came from directly behind the tent. A soft, almost deliberate step, another. And then, the eyes reappeared, not across the clearing. Not in the trees, but directly behind the tent. Just inches from where Eli's sleeping bag was. We didn't move. None of us breathed. It was like the forest had stopped existing, leaving only us and whatever was behind the tent. Then the eyes blinked slowly once, twice, and the air went completely still. I swear I could hear a heartbeat, slow and deliberate, not ours. Eli whispered something that still haunts me. It knows we're awake. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. Mark and I took turns keeping watch while Eli just sat, trembling, staring at the shadows beyond the tent. At first light, the eyes were gone, and so was the oppressive feeling. We packed everything in record time and hiked back to the truck. I didn't look back even once. Since that weekend, I've tried to make sense of it. We went back later in daylight. Nothing. No signs of anything unusual. No tracks, no animals, nothing. But I've read about this area before. People mention strange sightings in Mendocino's northern forests. Lights that move against the wind, glowing eyes following hikers, whispers in the trees. Most of it is dismissed as stories, but after what I saw, I don't think so. I still dream about it. Not nightmares exactly, but dreams where the eyes are there, always watching, waiting. Sometimes I wake up feeling that same slow heartbeat, like it's right behind me. I don't know what it was. Maybe a predator, maybe something else entirely. But if you're ever hiking through northern Mendocino late at night and you catch a glimpse of glowing eyes in the trees, just know that whatever is watching isn't always in front of you. because sometimes it's behind you. I've tried to keep this as close to a first-person account style as possible, like someone is telling it on Reddit's No Sleep. I'll never forget the first time I heard about Alder Creek. Back in 2017, I was still living in Northern California, and I had a friend, Jason, who was obsessed with camping and abandoned places. He told me about a spot deep in the forests around Alder Creek where he and his girlfriend, Melissa, had planned a weekend getaway. "It's completely off the map," he said, almost with pride. "No cell service, no tourists, just pure nature." I was hesitant, mostly because I wasn't much of a camper, but the way Jason talked about it, like he'd discovered a secret part of the world, made it sound exciting. He promised it would be safe, and I ended up agreeing to join them, even though I wasn't expecting to actually make the trip. What happened that weekend has stuck with me in ways I can't shake. Even now, when I drive past the northern forests, I feel that same cold unease crawling along my spine. We arrived at Alder Creek late Friday afternoon. The road leading up to the trailhead was a narrow, twisting dirt path lined with thick pines, their shadows already stretching long as the sun dipped below the horizon. We parked at a small clearing and started hiking the last mile to the spot Jason had scouted. The air was unusually still, and there was this faint, almost metallic smell in the breeze, like damp iron. I mentioned it, and Jason just shrugged, saying it was probably from the creek itself. By the time we reached the clearing where we would camp, the sky was already a dark indigo. The creek babbled nearby, but the sound was muted, almost swallowed by the trees. It was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the forest was holding its breath. Jason and Melissa set up the tent while I tried to start a fire. Everything seemed normal at first. We unpacked our gear, laughed about how out of place we felt, and ate dinner cooked over the small campfire. But as darkness fell, things started to feel off. It started with the sounds. At first, it was nothing we could name. Branches snapping, leaves rustling, faint whispers that seemed just beyond comprehension. I told myself it was just the forest, owls, wind, maybe even deer. But then Melissa pointed out that the noises didn't match any pattern of wildlife we'd ever heard. "It's like someone's walking around us," she whispered, her voice tense. We laughed it off at first, trying to reassure each other. "Probably just a raccoon or something," Jason said, though I noticed he sounded nervous. We went to bed early, bundled in our sleeping bags, the small tent glowing faintly from the dying embers outside. I woke up sometime after midnight because I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The forest outside seemed darker than it had been, even with the moonlight. The creek was silent, like it had been cut off. And then I heard it, the faintest scraping sound, coming from somewhere beyond the trees, slow and deliberate, like claws on bark. I woke Jason and Melissa, but as soon as we unzipped the tent, there was nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to explain the sound at all. Jason laughed nervously and suggested it was probably my imagination. Melissa shivered, but we eventually convinced ourselves to try and sleep again. The next morning, the forest felt heavier. The air was thick, damp, and there was a strange, almost sweet smell mixed with decay. Jason wanted to explore a bit upstream, so we packed a small day bag and started hiking. The trail was narrow, overgrown, and twisted in ways I hadn't noticed the day before. Every few minutes, I felt like we were being watched. I'd catch glimpses of movement just at the corner of my eye, figures or shadows, but whenever I turned, there was nothing. That's when we found the first clue that something was very wrong. A log, freshly carved, stood at the side of the trail. In jagged, deliberate letters was a single word: "Wait." I froze. Jason and Melissa looked at each other, unsure if it was a joke or some kind of warning. I wanted to leave, but Jason insisted it was probably some prank from hikers who'd been here before. Still, an unease settled in my stomach that I couldn't ignore. We continued, but as we hiked deeper, the forest seemed to close in. The canopy thickened unnaturally, and the path we had taken the previous day seemed to shift beneath our feet. I swear I saw the same tree 3 times in a row, as if we were walking in circles. Melissa started whispering that we should turn back, that something was wrong. Jason brushed it off, but I could see he was getting tense. That evening, when we returned to our campsite, something had changed. The tent was still there, but the fire we had left dying in the ashes was completely gone, and the air was still, oppressively still, as if even the forest had stopped breathing. The strangest thing, though, was that Jason and Melissa, my friends, looked Different. Not physically, but their expressions were blank in a way that didn't feel human. I tried to speak to them, but the words felt wrong when they replied. Their voices were flat, monotone, like they were repeating lines they had rehearsed. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like I was watching a reflection of the people I knew, not the real versions. By nightfall, the tension became unbearable. I had a dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream. In it, I was alone in the forest. I could hear whispers calling my name, echoing from every direction. I woke up sweating, and when I looked around, the tent was empty. No Jason, no Melissa, just the soft trickle of the creek and the echo of that same word carved into another log. Wait! I called out for them, panicked, my voice cracking. There was no answer, just the sound of leaves rustling under some unseen weight. I ran through the clearing, searching, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. But every time I thought I spotted them, the figures disappeared into the shadows. I ended up leaving the campsite that night, stumbling back along the trail in a kind of blind panic. When I finally made it to the car, I noticed something I will never forget. The campsite from the road looked completely normal. The tent was zipped up, our gear neatly stacked. No sign that anything had gone wrong. And then I saw the log lying at the edge of the clearing. Wait! I reported the incident to the authorities the next day, but there was little they could do. Jason and Melissa were officially listed as missing, and despite weeks of searching, no trace of them was ever found. The campsite remained untouched, and the logs continued to appear, always with that same single word carved neatly and deliberately. I haven't been back to Alder Creek since. I don't plan to, but sometimes when I'm alone at night, I still see those shadows moving just beyond the tree line, hear faint scraping sounds, and I swear I hear someone whispering my name, urging me to wait. Even writing this now, I feel it, like the forest is listening. And I can't help but wonder, what are we supposed to wait for? Or worse, who is waiting for us? Because if the logs are anything to go by, the forest doesn't just want us gone. It wants us to stay.